On the bus with Jenny. I met Jenny on a bus, an express bus that did not pick up or let off any passengers for about 1,000 miles. I boarded the bus in Tallahassee, Florida, as I was making my way north from South Florida. I looked from seat to seat, but no one was more inviting than this girl, age 17, with a brown sweatshirt with the name of a Baptist camp on it. It was the summer of 1969, and even though the bus was air-conditioned, the temperature rose slightly as I asked if I could join her. Without hesitation, she moved her things from the seat next to her. Our shoulders touched as I slid into the tall, narrow seat. We introduced ourselves and told about our families, and then took turns describing recent relationships. Like me, Jenny was bouncing back from an ill-fated love, although hers sounded much more serious than mine. We encouraged one another and agreed that both of us had troubled relationships. She was part Cuban, and her mother appeared to be from West Virginia. I concluded this from the fact that her grandmother lived in Beckley, her immediate destination. I loved Beckley, West Virginia, which is not far from where my own mother grew up. Mom was from the town of Hinton, and Beckley was the nearby city where many things unavailable in Hinton could be purchased. Jenny and I compared notes about our two West Virginia families, neither of which came anything close to the hillbilly stereotype. They're good people, people of the earth, with strong morals bolstered by religious faith that provided meaning and purpose in life. But I enjoyed looking into her eyes as Jenny spoke of her faith and the camp that was emblazoned on her brown sweatshirt. I compared with her my anticipation of attending Moody Bible Institute the next year. My eyes caught hers, and we both smiled. A common faith is a promising beginning for any relationship. I really liked the way she talked and felt and thought, and I think she felt the same way about me, but I just could not be certain of that. I kept stealing a glance at her hand, which she held on her lap. I wanted to reach out and hold that beautiful light brown hand, but I didn't want to offend her by touching her lap. I suppose I should have asked, but that would have revealed that I didn't quite know what I was supposed to do. I felt I was convincing her that I was self-assured and knew what I was doing. I was tortured by the presence of that hand. My hand was aching to intermingle with hers. As the sun went down and the darkness filled the bus, I turned on the reading light. I turned it on less to read than to basically look at her face, that beautiful face that only the genes of a Cuban father and American mother could produce. She told me she was getting sleepy and was going to take a nap. Her eyes closed. Now I could look more closely at her face without having to worry about her finding me staring at this eighth wonder of the world. As she entered a deeper level of sleep, her head slowly moved from the headrest toward my side of the chair. Her cheek gently landed on my shoulder. The stars of the sky twinkled more brightly, and I inhaled deeply. This almost trumped my ongoing desire to hold her hand. Well, not quite, but close. I now know that this tiny movement called for, sliding my hand over hers to show that I approved, and perhaps she would wake up enough to blend her fingers with mine. I thought about this over and over, but I was too afraid that I would embarrass her, or be embarrassed, or quite possibly both. Then a new, even crazier thought occurred to me. Though I could not coax myself to hold her hand, now I thought of how close her head was to mine, and how easily I could turn my head and place a light kiss on her cheek. Even if she did not wake up, it would be sheer ecstasy. And if she did wake up, She might take me far beyond the third heaven I had heard about by returning that kiss. But then I thought, what if she doesn't want the kiss? What if she slapped me instead? What if I lost this newfound friend? And the questions kept me from taking a chance. I held back out of fear. Heaven and earth might have stood still if I had taken that chance, but fear kept me from that intergalactic anomaly. This place between heaven and earth was a purgatory that kept me from luminescent possibilities. I couldn't even turn my head. The sweet face that almost touched mine stirred, and her eyes opened. She looked into my eyes that were staring at hers, and she smiled. The old gospel song goes, "Heaven came down and glory filled my soul." Now I knew what they were singing about. But she had closed her eyes again. I wanted to kiss her. I wanted to hold her hand. I wanted to claim her as my own. But now she was sleeping again, and I hated myself for the hesitation to take a chance on love. I soon gave in to my heavy eyelids, and her beautiful brown hair left my shoulder at some point in the night. And then it was morning. The sun rose and the longing resumed. We talked. Anything and everything was a possible topic, from Calvinism to roast beef. Frankly, I preferred the latter. As the bus inched forward across the map, we can miss a lot of life because of the fear of looking stupid. I realize I may be making far more out of this than I should. Yet it strikes me as odd that I went to Florida to see someone that did not return my affection, and now I was returning from Florida and now unwilling to give affection to someone that could probably would have received it. And how do I know that? Because we wrote for another year. We wrote almost every week, maybe more, and that entire year I was at Moody Bible Institute. And then one day, I received her last letter. She said she had been married earlier that day. Jenny and the Beatles. At some point that morning, the bus stopped at a Greasy Spoon restaurant for breakfast. It was the deep South, and not unlike a lot of recent graduates of high school, I wanted to impress the girl I was with. The bus emptied, and everyone found a booth or a stool. The red stools next to the counter could be turned to go higher or reversed to go lower. Jenny and I chose the stools. The waitress with big hair and white apron took our orders. I ordered a hamburger, and Jenny took my lead but added a slice of cheese. The waitress winced and put away her pad. It occurred to me that the jukebox was silent. From my pocket, I dug out 3 quarters. Songs were 3 for a quarter in those days, and I sauntered over to the music box. Only 2 of the songs available were not country and western ballads. They were 2 Beatles songs on opposite sides of a 45 RPM record. One was Revolution, one of the wildest and rockiest songs of the time. The other was Hey Jude, a hit song that had the distinction of being almost 7 minutes long. Both songs were a foreign language musically to most, if not all, of the bus riders, as well as the locals that were in the restaurant. But they were exactly what I wanted to hear, and what I wanted Jenny to hear, and frankly, what I wanted everyone to hear. I scanned the restaurant to make sure no one was watching me as I inserted the first quarter. I then pushed buttons for Revolution, then the buttons for Hey Jude, and finally the buttons for Revolution. I put in a second quarter and pushed Hey Jude, Revolution, and Hey Jude. The third quarter dropped into the slot as I entered Revolution, Hey Jude, and you guessed it, Revolution. A glance around the room indicated that no one had noticed, and my short hair and lack of facial hair should keep me from being discovered in case there was some reaction. And I kinda hoped for some reaction. I quietly returned to my seat. Had I guessed wrong? Might Jenny and I just have a nice meal with the Beatles? Well, the answer was clearly no. The machine complied to the first of my requests, and the jarring sound of loud guitars and the heavy beat of Revolution began. There were disturbed glances as the lyrics of John Lennon and Paul McCartney filled the air. Jenny asked me what else I had chosen. Hey Jude, I responded. And, well, Revolution, and Hey Jude, and Revolution, and Hey Jude, and, well, you get the idea. She giggled, and our eyes met one another. It was some fun to be savored along with the soggy hamburgers. It was not funny to anyone else in the diner. Several eyes glared, and it was clear people were not happy. But they could not find any source for this invasion. Everyone present had properly short hair, and not a whisker was to be seen. So there was no one to be blamed. One could almost sense sighs of relief as the song ended. That is, until Hey Jude began. To the consternation of everyone, the Beatles sang on and on for what seemed like an extended eternity. The Beatles succeeded in taking a sad song and making it better. But even with the softer beat, the lyrics challenged the sensibilities of the good Southern stock that frequented this diner. The hamburgers were starting to get cool, but we each took another bite as Hey Jude faded. Then, the screaming guitars and the heavy beat brought back the heat of Revolution again. Facial irritation became facial contortions. Some even seemed to be in pain. There were more angry glares. I talked to Jenny to avoid any eye contact with others, but everyone's eyes seemed to be asking who had paid to hear the worst of the two rock and roll hits a second time. The lack of hippies was disconcerting. The owner of the cafe was now distressed, as he probably equated decline in mood with a decline in tips. But most people began to resign themselves to the fact that a quarter had been spent, so the 3 songs had to be endured. Our now slimy hamburgers were beginning to taste better. As Revolution wound down, relief again was visible among the customers. They were ready for silence, or perhaps a country ballad or two. But instead, Paul McCartney overcame the silence with another 6+ minutes of Hey Jude. One customer had now had enough. He stepped up to the jukebox and inserted quarters and pushed buttons. But Hey Jude continued on and on, finally fading into the horizon. Then again, blaring guitars and the words, "Hey, you want a revolution?" And while revolution was not the thought of those present, it's quite likely that murder was being considered. But who? A few minutes later, the Beatles finished their masterpiece, and once more, Hey Jude commenced. The temperature of the room increased as one occupant of the greasy spoon began to hit the coin return button of the jukebox. When that didn't help, he began to push buttons at random as Hey Jude continued its 6-minute journey. Jenny and I struggled to hide our grins. Hey Jude finally concluded, and Revolution again filled the air. We watched the owner of the diner join several customers peering into the jukebox, and one person hit the sides of the machine as if something was wrong with it. Others began pushing buttons with the dim hope that they could stop this British intrusion into their Southern lives. But it was to no avail. John Lennon continued to sing one of his greatest hits, accompanied by expletives from the none too happy audience. Several were now hitting the jukebox, trying to get it to stop. I suppose pulling the plug just did not cross their minds. As Hey Jude once more began its nearly 7-minute trek, the bus driver announced that we needed to board the bus and start northward. Owner and customers who remained were now rocking the jukebox from side to side, trying to get it to stop. Jenny and I slowly left our stools, waiting as the rest of the bus riders left. The rocking of the music machine continued, and we turned to go out the door. We slowly walked across the parking lot, where the bus beckoned the doors wide open. But we paused a few moments before boarding, just to have the satisfaction of hearing the first few bars of Revolution screech from the diner. It was the concluding song of our 75-cent banquet. Was it meanness that prompted my actions? Or was it a desire to impress Jenny? Well, I can't dismiss either one of these possibilities entirely, but I want to think that I desired to challenge people with new ways of thinking, as uncomfortable as that might be. This first attempt may have been unsuccessful in making change, but clearly successful in showing me how much fun it was trying to broaden people's perspectives. At Moody, there was a mandatory Christian work assignment. While the work was done without pay, this was an attempt to get students to do ministry from the very beginning of their educational experience. On-the-job training was limited to ministry areas that were available. There was nothing that fit radio technology, missionary or otherwise. I was a little afraid of doing prison ministry and prayed that God would reveal what I should do. The results came in. I was assigned to teach kids at a children's home on the north side of Chicago. I didn't know how it would be to teach kids, but having been one, I figured it couldn't be that hard. With my group of Moody students, I tried to figure out what to do. I hoped they knew more about it than I did, and they probably did, but they didn't challenge the really awful ideas that I had. I decided I would read to the kids from a book that was supposedly a children's version of Pilgrim's Progress. When a person finds his own reading to be tedious, something is desperately wrong, and that's exactly what happened. I added inflection to my voice. I tried showing them pictures, but the centuries-old story just did not connect with these kids that were separated from their families. It is quite likely that many of them were abused and that others were neglected, and a boring story is not what they needed. One week I arrived early and watched the kids as they were playing on the playground. I saw a swing come loose that had been tied around a pole. It was about to hit a 7-year-old girl who was swinging, and yet she was oblivious to the danger. I jumped up and quickly grabbed it, just as the little girl realized I had spared her possible injury. Her response was spontaneous. She grabbed me around the waist and said, "You are my daddy." I was caught off guard. I was overwhelmed. I was awed. I had never been addressed as anyone's daddy. But I was also broken-hearted by the fact that this little girl had so little attachment with any man that she could take me for her father. I was surprised that I really wanted to be her father. I wanted her to call me daddy, and it actually be true. So I tried my best to be a bit of a daddy. I arrived early every week, and she was quick to greet me and let me hold her on my lap. I wanted to think of her as a daughter, but single men did not adopt young girls. I knew that. Sometimes one of her friends also wanted to be held and hugged. Then my overactive imagination began to put A and B together. I was corresponding with Jenny, who would soon be 18. She and I could be married. We could adopt one of those children. I could be father and husband. I wanted to be both, and now it was a possibility. But then I thought of my immaturity, my developmental delay. I was still growing up. I wasn't ready to be a husband. I wasn't ready to be a father. Who was I kidding by such thoughts? I don't think I wrote about this to Jenny. I was trying to be a man and make the decision by myself. I didn't realize that a mature man talks about such things with his wife, or in my case, a possible wife-to-be. But I was told by society to make the decision myself, and that thinking held me back from maturity. I also didn't realize that marriage matures a person, and fatherhood also builds maturity. Both bring responsibility that pushes you to think of others instead of yourself. I thought I had to wait for maturity to flower, but it doesn't work that way. Experience brings maturity. It probably would have worked. Jenny was not yet married, but I still struggled with not being ready. She was ready and I was not. Or at least I told myself that. And my poor grades in classes seemed to confirm that. So my decision to not act cost me years of indecision, trying out relationships and running away because I was not yet mature. And I got stuck in immaturity. I met some nice girls and a few that were completely wrong for me. But it was wasted time.